So I want to share my first week in France. All the details, all the drama, even all the good stuff. And I want to have the opportunity to just show you lots of pictures and give you an idea of what making a move like this feels like to begin with. And even if you're not planning to make a move, if you're at a point in your life, especially in midlife, where you're sort of at a crossroads where you've got to decide what this next phase is going to look like or how to actually feel better once again, I think this will still be very helpful for you. If you're new here, I'm Keetra Thompson. I'm a certified master hypnotist. So, as a hypnotherapist, what I do with my clients is I help them go back on a subconscious level to get to the heart of what's driving their unwanted behaviors. And as an attachment style coach and a midlife coach, I help them to create a new way of living, a new way of connecting, and to deal with the anxiety, the depression, the numbness, the relationship dysfunction at the heart of the issue. So, they can create a life that they love. So, if you'd like to learn more about that, as always, you can check out the link in the description below where you can set up a completely no charge consultation phone call with me so we can chat, so I can help you get some clarity and I can make my best recommendation, which, of course, there is never any obligation. Okay, so let's dive into this move from the United States to France. Now, I'm in my 40s. My kids are grown. I'm divorced, and it's forced me at midlife to take a really hard look at what I want my life to be like. And I think the thing that gets people caught up the most is thinking they have to have some very clear, definitive answer about that. And I don't believe that you do. I believe that you can look ahead a bit. And of course, we want to look at the big picture. But if we wait to have all of our questions answered and complete and utter clarity on everything we decide, we'll never do anything. And the biggest mistake will be that we do nothing. And so, especially if you're someone considering a move to a new country, to Europe, I hope this video is helpful for you. First of all, I haven't done my hair in days. It's so incredibly hot and humid here. So the day I arrived in France was the absolute hottest day that France has ever recorded. There was a heat dome over the entire country and it was breaking records for heat everywhere. And so honestly, that has been one of the biggest struggles because in Europe in general, and especially in France, there isn't a lot of AC. And the air conditioning that they do have is not like the States. Like when you're in the States, you have central air conditioning in at least almost every home where I live. And it is powerful. It is strong. It's like walking into the refrigerator sometimes. And over here, they're small little units and they're in the wall and they don't equally cool the entire space that you're in. And so getting cooled off has been a huge, huge struggle. Now, I initially planned this trip as an extension of a vacation I was taking with my mother to Ireland. And then when I decided to change the timing on applying for my visa, I decided to stay. So we had flown over from Ireland, but we'd flown into Nice, even though I'm in Montpellier. So we had decided, oh, we'll drive around, we'll see France, it'll be great. But here we were in this heat wave. So from Nice, we drove over to Montpellier the next day. So I did stay one night in Nice. Beautiful, lovely, but overwhelmingly hot. And my first issue with being in France started there, not just because of the heat, but because driving in these cities is probably the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. The streets are incredibly tiny. They are obviously in a language I don't understand. There's a lot of one way, but there's also a lot of full-size lanes that are dedicated to bikes and walking. And you can't really tell that that's what they are until you almost turn into them and you see the painting on the ground that says, they're not for cars. And then there's some that are for all of them. And you have to look at the paintings on the grounds. They'll have a painting of a bike, a painting of a person, a painting of a car. And usually the car picture is really, really small. So navigating those cities, and then they have these pop-ups that come up through the street, these metal posts that don't let you access certain parts of the city unless you have a pass. And it just made driving very difficult. But once I got outside the town and I was on the highway, it felt a lot better, except for the tolls. The toll things on the highway were incredibly confusing. I didn't understand how they work. Now I think I have a better idea that you take the ticket, you drive to the next toll, you put the ticket back in, it tells you how much to pay. We didn't know to put the ticket back in. We still ended up being able to pay, but it was so, so stressful. Anyway, we finally get into Montpellier, and I had not realized that the Airbnb that I had booked was in a historical district. So, I mean, I knew it was in a historical district, but what I didn't know is that it was not accessible by car unless you had a special car pass to get through. Those metal things pop up out of the ground and don't let you access these streets. And so, after about 7 hours of driving to get there, a long, hot day, it was very difficult circling around, and you can't just like circle the block. It like takes you all around these weird, ways just to get back to where you were, trying desperately to find a way to get to the location. I was tired, I was hot, and at one point I found a place to park that wasn't really parking, but my mother was with me, so she stayed in the car. I hopped out and I went walking to find this actual address. I had to go down a cobblestone hill, through an alley and another alley, which they look like alleys, but they're just walking. Like there's all these residences in there, and there's even some little bars and stuff in there, but very, very different from the States. So I find the place, and then I have four suitcases because my mom cannot handle pulling suitcases through this. So I come back to the car, get the first two suitcases, drag them through all the way to the place, come back up again. There's a hill to come back to the car, do it again, drag everything down, finally find a way to get into a parking garage that is so tiny that I'm just freaked out the entire time. But I get in there, get the car parked, find our way back. By the time I got back, I realized my feet are covered in water blisters. The heat is so bad, like my bra is drenched, my clothes are drenched, just overwhelmingly hot. And the little wall unit of the AC that was in that place had not been on, but we got it turned on and tried to make the best of it. So this first place was really like it was a very old building, but the remodel wasn't done in a way that was truly modern. It was functional, it would have been great for a long weekend. But the fact that I'd booked it for 3 months, I was not going to be able to maintain it. The shower head was in a weird place on the wall, it was constantly getting the floor wet. You could barely maneuver in here. So it was difficult because we were so hot, we were so tired, and we couldn't cool off. Like I would take a cold shower, mind you, with this little AC unit on, and I would still get out of the shower. And if I put my glasses on, they would still totally steam up because my body was so overheated. It could not cool off. And that set me on my next journey to find someplace else to live. And I just want to mention that on my trip to Ireland prior to coming to France, the first day I had fallen, I'd slipped in the shower very badly. The shower mat slipped right out of my feet and I fell, hitting the bridge of my nose on the edge of the bathtub, my leg over the edge and onto the glass thing. I thought for sure I'd broken my nose. There was blood everywhere. And sorry for the gross description. I got myself out of there, got to the bed, was putting pressure on my nose to stop the bleeding, called the manager. They rushed up with ice packs for my face and my leg. I had a bruise about this big on my leg, which now has a bit of a hematoma. I think it will go away. Anyway, I they rushed to the store, got me arnica gel. Like they couldn't have been kinder or more attentive. I'm sure they were afraid I was going to sue the hotel or something. But luckily, even though my nose still hurts and it probably is still a little bit swollen, I don't think anyone else can tell other than me. And we're, 2.5, 3 weeks out from that happening. But it definitely has affected my mobility a bit. My leg has hurt. I've still been able to do all the things, but that was just to give you an idea, sort of a picture of how this trip started. And so, with the heat and not being able to cool off and not being able to function or even think clearly, it was a real problem. And so, I set about finding another place to rent, and so many people have been kind. I cannot even tell you. A woman helping us learn how to pump gas because gas is very different here, and then some guy screaming at her from behind, and her like saying, "Hey, I'm helping them," and I'm like, "I'm so sorry." And she's like, "Don't worry. They can wait." So much kindness, so much compassion. And the entire time I've felt so embarrassed almost. Like, that feeling where you just don't want to be a burden. And that's actually a deep programmed wound into me. And I've done so much work on it, but I could feel it coming to the surface here in France. I don't want to be a burden to anybody. And I felt like a burden to anyone I had to ask anything of. And I'm incredibly grateful that the people here have been so kind, but it's shown me some things about myself that are still floating to the surface. And so I've had to think about this. I've had to think about why I'm feeling this way and what it's bringing out in me. At first I felt like I was shrinking a bit. Like I would use the French words that I knew, but I would say them quiet. I would try to be, not noticed. I would try to not stand out. But it's kind of hard when you are an American in France. You're going to stand out a little bit. And I just want to reiterate how kind people have been. We looked at all these apartments. Some were gorgeous and beautiful, but in a really awful location where I would have needed a car. I looked down in Set, which is like a beachside town, beautiful, but like a spiral 6 flights of stairs to get to this apartment. So that wasn't ideal. Finally, at the end of my frantic day of looking for apartments, I had told someone I had contacted, I would love to see it, but I have a client call. I won't be done until 8:30 at night, that France time. Is it possible to see it then? And it doesn't get dark here until after 10 o'clock. So I knew it wasn't a totally bizarre request. And he was so open and great and said, absolutely, come by, see it. Let me know when you're here, whatever. So I walked over from my existing Airbnb to the apartment. It's still in the historic district. And he was so kind and welcoming and showed me the unit, told me all about it, how he and his wife live on the first and second floor. They'd remodeled the building and put these units above. And it was beautiful and modern and clean and functional. And the AC functioned. And I just knew this is exactly where I need to be. Now, mind you, this apartment, and I'm in it right now, is very tiny, very little. I've had walk-in closets half the size of this apartment probably, but it's perfect for me. It's just me. And so when you're making these changes, I think we tend to think of what we're used to living with or what we needed in the past, and maybe we don't need that anymore. It's just me. I can live more simply and with less things, and that's actually a blessing. And so not only did he agree to rent it to me, he agreed to a full 1 year lease, which for anyone who knows anything about getting a lease in France, oh my gosh, it can be quite difficult, especially when you don't have a French contract for work, when you work outside of the country. And so I have been so grateful to find this place. He introduced me to his wife and his daughters, and they are precious and they are kind. And last night I signed all the paperwork, and he and his wife invited me to stay for dinner, and their little girls are sweet. And I just felt so welcomed, so invited in. And I words can't say how incredibly grateful I am. Now, I want to mention one other thing that is sort of important to realize when you are getting a visa to move to France, you have to validate that visa after you move. Now, my attorney is going to take care of a lot of that, but because you have to validate it, trying to get any kind of European or French banking account just with your visa doesn't work. They want you to have like a government issued ID, like a driver's license, but just an ID. And so I can't set up payments to pay my rent without having that ID, and I can't get the ID until my visa is validated. And so I'm working on that. But it's another thing I'm really, really grateful for with this landlord is that he's allowed me to get the amount of money that I'm allowed to get out of an ATM every day because I can only do so much every day until I have the amount to pay him in full. And so he's been patient and kind and just so like understanding, and I'm so grateful. So I'm working on getting the visa validated. And the other thing is the heat, I cannot explain how difficult it's been, the heat. I just can't go outside for very long at all. Like, oh, let me give you an example. So before I left this morning, I put my washing out on the drying rack on the balcony. And here you just don't, people don't have dryers. So I hung it up. I walked about a block and a half to get groceries. And I came back. I did spend a little time there because the grocery store is sort of attached to like a mall a little bit, and I needed some throw rugs and some other stuff. But I got back maybe an hour later, maybe. I don't know if I even took that long. And everything was dry. Everything was dry. So the heat has made me doubt my choice of Montpellier. I did do a 2-day trip up to Bordeaux where it was just, even halfway there, stopping at a rest area was cooler and refreshing, and Bordeaux was cooler, even though I know that's not always the case. But I had to remind myself, okay, if this city doesn't fit eventually, I could go somewhere else that's cooler or the temperatures are more what I can manage. But in the meantime, I'm giving it a chance. I'm staying, I'm giving it a chance, and if I decide at some point later on, that's obviously an option. I can always choose to be someplace else. The other issue with the heat is that my legs and feet have been incredibly swollen. I would say my whole body is probably a bit swollen, and it's caused me some concern. But now that I'm finally able to cool off in my apartment, I can wear like compression socks and I can really like baby my body a little bit to get it back on track. So that's a concern that I've been dealing with. I've Googled some information about how your body tries to cool itself and opens up your veins and, presses sort of liquid out that way. And anyway, I think it's something I can overcome, but there's things like that that I didn't anticipate. And so I think with any big jump or leap, there's always going to be these things that you just cannot anticipate. And that's okay. I definitely knew that there were going to be things like that. I just expected that the AC unit in the first unit would be more functional than it was, and it just wasn't. And so sometimes there's things you just aren't going to know until you get somewhere and see it firsthand, because no matter what someone says, oh yeah, it's great, it's strong, it's, good Wi-Fi, all the things, you just don't know until you're there. And so giving yourself some grace for that, I think, is really, really important. And so I just want to circle back a little bit to what it has shown me, what I've learned, and what it's brought up even from my past. There have been some fears and that feeling of like, I really want to honor their culture. I want to honor the place I'm in, and I don't know the language and I need to learn it, but it's just not going to happen overnight. And so that feeling of being a burden is something I had to sit with a bit and realize that it's very old, that feeling of being a burden, asking for attention or affection or connection and not getting it as a child and not even being able to ask for it clearly is really where that comes from. So think about how you are, even as an adult, but especially as a child. You don't say, hey, I need some connection time. You typically have a bid for connection where you say something, you move closer, you say, hey, look at this. this? What about that? And it isn't reciprocated, not because someone's being willfully mean or neglectful, but it just isn't always reciprocated. And it tells you as you're programming your subconscious mind that maybe something's wrong with me because you don't have any discernment when you're programming that subconscious mind. And primarily, we're doing that from birth to age 7. And remember, the subconscious mind is driving over 95% of everything we think, feel, and do. So even when we do work on these things and we reach a point where, in the States, I felt competent, and even if I came across things that I didn't understand or were different or new, I felt very competent in my own abilities and my ability to solve the problem. But in a place like this, where it's totally new, I don't have that level of competency to fall back on. And so that feeling really crept up. And I didn't want to be seen and heard. I wanted to be quiet and small and observe and take in information. And I've also had to realize there are times I still do need to communicate and express needs and ask questions, and that's okay. And I can know that consciously, but it doesn't mean that there's not some subconscious programming that's still a little underneath there that's showing me. And that's really what healing is. When we do the deep subconscious work, we get this incredible leap ahead, like a gigantic movement forward into dealing with those old feelings and becoming who we're choosing to be as we move forward. But it doesn't mean there's not some lingering things that sometimes are good to circle back around and reassess. And so I think in midlife, we're battling two things: the old programming of who we once were, and the deep, deep knowing that we are not living in complete authenticity to who we are and what we want. And maybe we don't even know what we want, but we just know that what we're doing doesn't feel right anymore. It's important to honor that awareness and that feeling and to be curious about it, because it is very easy to continue in the path we have been on. I can't tell you how many people said to me, "Well, what about your kids? You're leaving? What about your kids?" My kids are adults. My youngest is 21. My middle son is 23. My oldest is 28. I have been divorced from their dad for 10 years, doing all the things, being the main person. Now, does that mean I just give up on my relationship with my kids? Absolutely not. I couldn't love human beings more than I love those human beings. However, I had to understand that it is not my job to overfunction or just sit there as a waiting place to allow for them to just always have me available. They have a dad, they have family, they have their grandparents where they are. They're coming to see me in just a few weeks, which I'm very excited about. But you have to be able to give yourself permission to not be who you once were without knowing yet who you are becoming. That's really important. Deciding that I don't have to be who I once was and not knowing who I'm becoming fully can feel like a really scary space to be in, but it's an important space to be in because you're crafting what you want to be. And if you're careful, you're going to do it aligned with your authenticity. If you are doing the subconscious work, if you are doing careful introspective work as you do it, you're not going to betray yourself in the process. And so who you're actually becoming is a more authentic you, but it's just a you that you haven't embraced for a very long time. And we never let go fully of the other parts of us, but we're now creating an integrated version of who we've been into who we actually are and who we're becoming. If you'd like help with that, this is what I do with my clients so that they don't stay stuck, so they don't look back when they're 85 years old and think, why didn't I just step into the unknown and take that leap? Why didn't I make my relationships amazing? Why didn't I honor my own needs? I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that level of regret. Now, we're always going to regret something because we can't do everything. But self-betrayal, I truly believe, is the biggest regret we will ever, ever have. So I hope you enjoyed coming along on this journey with me. I love that you are here and you're a part of it. And I plan on sharing much more about this journey into France, but also the way that this plays out as someone recovering from divorce in midlife, I think is really, really important. So join me on the journey, and until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.